I was staring at the company logo on the conference room wall the moment it hit me they were about to gut me in public. I'm Eric Dalton, 36, single dad, director of client success, at least I was, until they decided my value could be cut in half with one piece of paper. Brent Halpern was already there when I walked in, smoothing his perfect tie like it mattered more than the meeting itself. Shannon from HR wouldn't even look at me. There was a folder on the table between them, thick with legal boilerplate and thin with decency. Brent smiled that corporate predator grin. "Morning, Eric. Let's sit down." I knew the script. I'd seen it play out for other people, other teams, but I always told myself I was safe because I did the work no one else would. Late nights, client fires at 2 a.m., birthdays missed, school pickups rearranged, because this was stability for me for my son. And then they slid the paper across the table like it was my last meal. 50%. No preamble, no apology, just a number. I remember my mouth going dry, the HVAC system humming overhead way too loud in the silence. I picked up the paper, hands shaking just enough to piss me off. Effective immediately, it read. Adjusted compensation to better align with market standards. That's how they worded it. A slow, sterile death sentence for 9 years of loyalty. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice even. "You're cutting my pay by half." Brent leaned back like we were having a friendly chat over drinks. "Eric, we're realigning roles post-acquisition. Some responsibilities are moving to San Jose. You'll still have a valuable role supporting transitions regionally." Supporting, not leading. Shannon finally found his voice. "We believe this change reflects our commitment to efficiency." I almost laughed in his face. I didn't, though, because I couldn't afford to. So I took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. I'll need 24 hours to consider. They both visibly relaxed. Brent actually thanked me. Shannon closed the folder like the execution had been postponed. But when I walked out, my knees felt like they'd betray me too. I didn't cry in the elevator. I waited until I was in my car. That's where it all spilled out, ugly, shaking sobs that fogged up the windshield. Rain hit the glass like it wanted to drown me in it. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about being told you're disposable after nearly a decade of saving their asses. It was about knowing my kid's inhaler was in the glove box while I sat there wondering how the hell I was going to tell him why everything was about to change. If you've ever sat in a parking garage realizing you're about to lose everything you built, you know exactly what that moment feels like. Let me know you're listening. I didn't want to go home yet. Didn't want to look at the walls and see every late night I justified as providing. So I sat, long enough for the rain to slow, for my breathing to steady. And then I pulled out my phone. One unread text from Derek Munoz, an old colleague who'd escaped 6 months ago. "Check your LinkedIn inbox, it's important." I wiped my eyes, opened the app, and read the message that would change everything. I remember thinking maybe they just underestimated the wrong person. And I want you to hear what happened next, because it didn't end in that room. It started there. I read Derek's message twice. "Check your LinkedIn inbox. It's important." My thumb hovered over the screen. It felt ridiculous how something so small could carry so much weight. My hands were still trembling from the meeting, but this was different. Not fear this time, some raw, half-formed hope trying to crawl out of my chest. I opened my LinkedIn. There it was. A single message from Derek sent 3 days ago. "Eric, my CEO wants to talk to you. We've been watching what's happening over there. We know your value. Let's talk. Name the time." My breath actually hitched, because for the first time in hours I remembered I wasn't the idiot who screwed this up. I was the idiot who stayed too long. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. "We know your value." No one at Riverpoint had said that to me in years. My first instinct was to call immediately. Just say yes. But my brain kicked in. Careful. They cut you once today, don't let hope do it again. So I sat in the car until the windows fully fogged, reading the message again, thinking about Miles. I could see his face in my head, that cautious little frown he got whenever he heard raised voices. I couldn't do this to him, not the broke, beaten-down version of me they tried to manufacture. So I typed one line. "Can we talk today? Call me." Derek called within minutes. "Man," he said, "without hello, I was hoping you'd see it." I forced my voice steady. "What is this?" He didn't sugarcoat. "It's an invitation. We've been watching Riverpoint since the acquisition, watching them destroy everything that made it work, watching you hold it together. My CEO wants to meet." I almost laughed. "He doesn't even know me." Derek snorted. "You think he hasn't read every retention report in the region? Your name comes up like a damn watermark." It was silent for a beat. Then I admitted it. They cut me in half today. Salary, title, respect. He sighed. I'm sorry, man. I knew it was coming. That's why I left. I didn't have a kid to think about. That one stung, because that was the truth I'd been avoiding. I hadn't stayed for loyalty. I'd stayed because I was scared of the unknown with Miles to feed. Derek's voice softened. Eric, let them gut you or come talk to someone who sees your worth. Up to you. I looked at the clock. Miles would be out of school in 2 hours. I can meet now, I said. Westside Cafe by Pike Place. He'll be there. I hung up and just sat there. Was I really going to do this? I checked my glove box. Miles's inhaler. My eyes burned again. I wasn't going to let them make me explain to my son why he couldn't have what he needed. So I put the car in gear. Seattle traffic was its usual nightmare, but I barely noticed. My mind was running audit trails of every deal I'd saved every client who'd threatened to leave, but didn't, because I took the call at 2 a.m. They thought they were cutting a number. They were cutting the reason clients stayed. By the time I parked near Pike Place, I was shaking again, but with adrenaline this time. I checked my hair in the mirror, wiped my eyes. Because even if this was just a conversation, I wasn't going to show up looking defeated. The cafe was half full of freelancers with laptops, the usual smell of espresso and wet jackets. I found Derek immediately. He stood, hugged me, too long, too tight, like he knew exactly how bad I needed it. And there was someone else at the table, Marcellus Grant, CEO of Nexus Technologies. No suit, just a sweater, dark jeans, coffee already half finished. He watched me carefully, not evaluating, studying. Eric Dalton, he said, standing to shake my hand. I've heard a lot about you. I tried to match his grip, hope it was good. He smiled. The best parts usually are. We sat. I didn't touch my coffee. My stomach was too tight. Marcellus didn't waste time. Derek tells me you had a bad morning. I let out a humorless laugh. That's one way to put it. Want to tell me what happened? And I did. I didn't hold back. The acquisition, the culture shift, the silent firings, the HR speak justifying gutting loyal employees. I told him about the meeting that morning, the 50% pay cut, and writing the promise of a new support role. About sitting in my car wondering how to tell my kid his dad had failed him. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, it was quiet for a long moment. Then Marcellus leaned forward. Good. Now let's talk about what you really want to do next. That line hit me in the chest, because no one at River Point had ever asked me that. I looked at Derek. He just nodded. And I realized I wasn't trapped. I still had moves left. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them set the terms anymore. I was going to read the fine print myself. Because the next time someone handed me a contract, it was going to be one I wrote. And I want you to hear exactly how that happened. I want you to hear exactly how that happened. Because the truth is, I didn't walk into that cafe ready to betray anyone. I walked in desperate not to drown. Marcellus didn't rush me. He let me talk, let me lay it all out, like evidence in a trial. The humiliating meeting, the HR speak about market standards, that single sheet of paper with my new worth stamped on it like I was an overstock item on clearance. He didn't smile or nod sympathetically. He just listened, which honestly was worse in some ways because it meant I heard myself say it out loud. When I was done, he folded his hands around his coffee cup and said quietly, "So tell me, why did you stay so long?" That question landed in my gut like a fist, because I knew the answer. I told him about Miles, how asthma meds aren't cheap, how Seattle rent doesn't care about your good intentions, how being a single dad meant safe was better than sorry. I watched his face while I spoke, looking for pity, but he didn't give me any. Instead, he said, "That's not weakness, Eric. That's motive. Motive is good. Motive keeps you moving." I wanted to scoff, but the way he said it, I don't know. It felt like permission. Derek jumped in. "He's the reason I left, you know." He jerked a thumb at me. "I watched them gut your team, move your accounts to San Jose, and you still held retention rates they couldn't touch." I swallowed, because even now, after everything I needed to hear, it wasn't my fault. Marcellus leaned back. "Look, I'm not going to bullshit you. This isn't charity. I'm offering you a job because you're damn good. Your clients don't stay because of River Point. They stay because of you. I know it. Derek knows it. Hell, even Brent knows it. He just doesn't want to pay for it." That made me bark out a laugh. Bitter, but real. He didn't flinch. He slid a folder across the table. I didn't open it at first. My fingers just sat there on the cardboard sweating. Because I knew the second I opened it, everything changed. Finally, I flipped it open. Director of Strategic Partnerships. 165K base, bonus structure that actually made sense, stock options, full health coverage explicitly including pediatric asthma treatment. I felt my eyes sting. Because this wasn't just money, it was respect in black and white. Why me? I asked, voice cracking in spite of myself. Marcellus didn't hesitate. Because for 2 years, we've tried to poach your clients and they all said the same thing. We'll move if Eric does. Because you're not a cost, you're an asset. And Riverpoint forgot that. I sat back. My heart was racing. Then my brain kicked in the part of me Riverpoint had trained too well. What about my contract? I asked. Marcellus smiled just a little. That's your call. But Derek mentioned you've got an old agreement, right? Pre-acquisition worth a read. My fingers drummed the table. I hadn't looked at that damn contract in years. Because I never thought I'd need to. But in that moment, I remembered a line. Any reduction in compensation exceeding 15% nullifies all transition obligations. My stomach flipped. Because Brent and Shannon hadn't just insulted me, they'd handed me the keys to my own exit. I looked at Marcellus. You're not asking me to steal anyone, I said slowly. He shook his head. I'm asking you to bet on yourself. If they want to follow you, that's their choice. I believed him. God help me, I actually believed him. I closed the folder, but before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Miles' school. A reminder about his inhaler refill. I stared at it so long, Marcellus finally spoke. You don't have to answer today. I shook my head. No, I do. Because I'd already decided. I wasn't going to be the reason my son learned to settle. I met Marcellus's eyes. I have to give Riverpoint an answer by noon tomorrow. Then do it on your terms, he said. We stood. We shook hands. As I walked out, I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Not revenge. Just the first flicker of freedom. But freedom isn't free. It costs you everything you thought you needed to hold on to. And I was about to find out just how much I was willing to pay. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat at the kitchen table long after Miles went to bed, the glow from the baby monitor casting weird shadows on the paperwork spread out in front of me. My original employment contract was there, crease-smudged, older than it should have been for something so important. I read Clause 4.2 so many times I could have recited it like scripture. Any reduction in base compensation exceeding 15% shall nullify transition obligations. 15%. They'd gone for 50. I leaned back in the chair, fingers drumming the table. Nullify transition obligations wasn't just lawyer speak. It meant they couldn't make me stay. No transition period. No forced handoff of my accounts to some eager junior in San Jose. They couldn't squeeze one more hour out of me at half the pay. I closed my eyes, and I felt something. Not triumph, not yet. Fear. Because I knew them. Riverpoint might smile in meetings and serve up foamy lattes in the lobby, but when pushed, they'd show teeth. HR would call it breach. Legal would start rattling sabers. And even if I walked out clean, there'd be damage left behind. My team. Marcus, who'd covered my ass 100 times. Lena, who stayed late every damn Friday to meet client deadlines. Jody, who'd taken a pay freeze without complaining because she didn't want to jump ship when we were short-staffed. They didn't have this clause. They'd be the ones cleaning up the mess. I felt my chest tighten. Miles's inhaler sat on the counter next to my phone. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand. That was the price, wasn't it? My kid's breathing, my sanity. I had to go. I had to walk out clean. But that didn't mean I had to leave them screwed. I opened my laptop, started drafting an email. Short, to the point, but real. I'm leaving, but there's room here for you if you want it. No pressure. Just know you're not stuck. I didn't hit send, not yet. But it felt like the first honest thing I'd written in months. I set the inhaler down. Then I opened the Nexus folder Marcellus had given me. Director of Strategic Partnerships. Full pediatric coverage. Bonus structure that didn't feel like a scam. It felt like someone betting on me. No, not betting. Recognizing. Because I'd been the idiot who'd forgotten my own value. I laughed quietly. Dry. Bitter. Should have read my own damn contract years ago. I checked the time. 1:17 a.m. I pushed away from the table. Walked to Miles's room. He was asleep, one arm tossed over his stuffed shark. I stood there too long watching him breathe. Because that was the whole point. That was the why. Not revenge. Survival. Dignity. A life where he wouldn't learn to swallow shit and smile for a paycheck. I whispered to the dark, I'm not teaching you that. Not ever. Back at the table, I pulled the contract close. Read it one more time. This wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be an execution. Clinical. Precise. They handed me the blade. All I had to do was use it. But even with that certainty, I felt the fear curling in my gut. Brent wasn't stupid. Shannon wasn't soft. They'd come for me if they could. Emails, Slack logs, NDAs, client lists. I started making mental notes of every policy I'd followed, every rule I hadn't broken. I wasn't going to give them an inch. I closed the laptop, gathered the papers, put them back in the folder, because tomorrow wasn't about emotion. It was about making them see I'd already won before I even walked in the room. And as I turned off the light, I caught my reflection in the dark window. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself, and I couldn't tell if that was a good thing. I wish I could tell you I slept easy after that. But the truth is, I didn't sleep at all, because I knew exactly what I was going to say in that conference room, and I knew it would change everything. I didn't eat breakfast that morning. I poured coffee, let it go cold on the counter while I got Miles ready for school. He noticed. "Dad, you okay?" I forced a smile, just thinking about work. He looked at me the way only a kid can, like he could see straight through the lie but didn't know how to call it out. After drop-off, I sat in my car outside River Point for a full 10 minutes, watching the glass doors, counting my own heartbeats. They wouldn't see me sweat. Not today. When I finally walked in, I felt every step in my legs. My phone buzzed. A Slack message from Shannon, 7th floor conference. Now. Professional to the last. I took the elevator alone, watching my reflection in the chrome doors. Did I look like a man about to quit? Or a man about to win? Hard to tell. They were waiting for me. Brent in his expensive suit, Shannon with a notepad open to a blank page like he was ready to document my meltdown. I didn't sit right away. I put my folder down on the table slowly, deliberate. Brent gave me that smug half nod. "Eric, so, you've had time to consider our offer." I let the silence stretch. Then I sat, and I placed their paper on the table. Then my original contract on top of it. Brent squinted. "What's this?" My response, I said, calm, even. Shannon glanced down, confusion flickering before the corporate mask snapped back in place. "Clause 4.2, I said, tapping it once. "Any reduction in base compensation exceeding 15% nullifies transition obligations. You offered 50. So, I don't owe you a transition." The silence was glorious. Brent's jaw worked. He cleared his throat. "That's not how we're interpreting it." I actually laughed. "Read it again." Shannon's fingers twitched like he wanted to start typing, but wasn't sure what to write. Brent leaned forward. "You understand walking away like this will have consequences." I didn't blink. "Like what bad reference you'll tell people. I refused at a 50% pay cut. Go ahead." He tried again. "You'll need to transition your accounts." I shook my head. "Contract says you pay me previous rate for transition. You cut my rate in half. That obligation's void." A long pause. Then Brent's voice dropped. "We'll be reviewing all of your communications. Emails, Slack, client lists." There it was. The threat. I felt my pulse, but I forced my voice steady. "Do it. I didn't take anything. Didn't download files. Didn't forward a single contact. You know what you'll find. 9 years of cleaning up your messes." I watched Shannon write that down. Good. I wanted it in the notes. Brent's face reddened. "Eric, you're making a mistake. Think about your future in this industry." I let that hang for a second. Then I smiled. "It's funny you're worried about my future when you just tried to cut it in half." For 1 second, I thought he'd actually get up and leave. But he didn't. He just stared, because he knew. They'd screwed up. I stood, gathered my papers. No box, no laptop, just me. I paused at the door. Shannon wouldn't meet my eyes. Brent did. "Where are you going?" he asked, voice tight. I shrugged. "Somewhere that pays me what I'm worth." And before I walked out completely, I turned back just enough to see them both. I'm not the only one who'll do this. You know that, right? I didn't wait for the answer. As I stepped into the elevator, I let the adrenaline wash over me. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, from relief. Because I'd done it. I'd burned the bridge they'd soaked in gasoline. Before I continue, tell me about the time you had to stand your ground at work. Share it in the comments. I want to know. I'm not the only one who's had to choose self-respect over a paycheck. I pressed the button for the lobby. And as the doors closed, I realized this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't look back when I left the conference room. I could hear Brent's voice behind me, low and pissed, but I didn't turn around. Walking through that glass lobby felt like the longest 100 feet of my life. My badge clipped to my belt for 9 years. Just a plastic rectangle, but it felt like an anchor I was finally cutting loose. I handed it to the receptionist on my way out. She looked surprised, tried to say something. I didn't wait to hear it. Outside, the air was sharp and wet. Seattle doing its thing. I stood under the awning and let the drizzle mist my face. My hands were shaking. It wasn't rage anymore. It was adrenaline, fear, relief, a weird empty calm that felt unnatural in my chest. I walked to my car without rushing, unlocked it, and just sat there. For a second, I couldn't even start the engine. 9 years. Miles was 10. I'd built my entire world around this job. Paid the mortgage, covered his inhaler refills, made sure he could go to that little art camp he loved. And now, I let out one of those humorless laughs that's closer to a sob. I rubbed my face. Then I pulled out my phone. There was one unread message. Marcellus Grant, we're ready when you are, let me know. I stared at it. Funny how a single line can feel like a lifeline. I called. He picked up on the first ring. Eric, he said, calm, like we'd spoken 100 times. I swallowed. Marcellus, it's done. Silence. Then I heard him exhale slowly. You okay? I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I don't know yet. He didn't rush me. Take your time. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. I'm in. I want to make it official. Today. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't pitch me on a vision. He just said, good. Let's get you set up. HR will email you this afternoon. Expect onboarding forms. Same package we discussed, 165 base 25% bonus stock options, full health, including pediatric asthma coverage. I blinked. Right, because that part mattered. Miles mattered. It always came back to him. Marcellus's voice softened. You did the hard part. Now let's make sure you land on your feet. I cleared my throat. Thanks. Talk soon, Eric. Call ended. I dropped the phone onto the passenger seat and let my head fall back against the headrest. The rain drummed a steady rhythm on the roof. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there breathing. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. Tell me about the day you chose to walk away from something that was killing you slowly. Share it in the comments. Let's talk about what it took to finally say no more. I turned the key in the ignition, pulled out of the garage for the last time, watched River Point's logo shrink in my rearview mirror, and even though my chest was tight, there was this flicker of something in my gut. Not triumph. Not yet. But possibility. Because now I had to figure out how to tell Miles. And that was going to take every ounce of courage I had left. ChatGPT said, I sat in the car outside our townhouse for too long, watching the wipers push drizzle back and forth across the windshield like they were erasing evidence. My fingers drummed the steering wheel. Inside, the lights were on. Miles was probably at the table coloring, waiting for me to heat up leftovers. I'd rehearsed 100 ways to tell him. None of them felt right. I wasn't scared of telling my boss I was done. But telling my son, that was something else. I finally shut off the engine and stepped into the wet Seattle evening, my shoes scuffing over the cracked walkway. The door creaked when I pushed it open. He looked up immediately. Dad. His voice still had that high edge of childhood I knew would disappear too soon. Hey, buddy. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, hung up my jacket. He blinked at me, eyes narrowing like he could smell it. What's wrong? I forced a breath. Nothing bad for you, I said, which was the truth in the most twisted way. He set down his crayon. You're doing the serious voice? I smiled despite myself. Come here. He slid off his chair and walked over, socks slipping a little on the old floorboards. I knelt down to eye level. I quit my job today. His brow furrowed the way it does when he's reading something complicated. Like, for real. Yeah. Did you get fired? That hit me harder than I expected. I shook my head. No, I chose to leave. They wanted to pay me half of what they used to. He frowned deeper. Is that allowed? I huffed a laugh. Apparently, but I didn't have to stay for it. He was quiet. So, what happens now? And there it was. The question that had been clawing at me all day. I put my hands on his shoulders, felt how small and solid he was. I got another offer, a better one, with people who actually want me there. Like, more money, more than before. He paused. Can I still do art camp? My voice cracked a little. Yeah, buddy, you can do art camp. We're okay. He didn't smile. He just nodded seriously like he was 40 instead of 10. Good. Then he threw his arms around my neck. I held him tight, felt his hair against my cheek. I didn't realize how much I was shaking until he whispered, "You're gonna be okay too, right?" God. I squeezed him tighter. Yeah, I am now. We ate leftovers on the couch. Watched part of a movie I didn't remember because I was too busy watching him laugh. When he went to bed, I stood at the door for a long time, watching him breathe. I thought about the offer letter on my phone, the contract clause that let me walk, the look on Brent's face, the badge I'd dropped at the front desk like a dead thing I was glad to be rid of. I knew there was no going back, and I didn't want to. I closed his door softly behind me and went to the kitchen phone in hand, pulled up Marcellus's message. "Ready?" I typed back, "I'm in. Let's start tomorrow." Because once you tell the truth, there's nothing left but to see it through. I walked into Nexus that morning, trying not to look like a man who torched every bridge behind him. The elevator smelled like fresh wood polish instead of stale carpet. No corporate branding posters telling you to lean in or maximize synergy. Just silence and the muted hum of ambition. My new badge didn't feel heavy yet. Marcellus met me in the lobby with coffee in hand. No PowerPoint, no fake smile. "Welcome, Eric," he said, voice even and calm, like he'd been here for years. I nodded. "Ready?" I wasn't, but I said yeah. We walked through a glass corridor where the city spilled out in every direction. Seattle felt brighter from up here. First stop was a small conference room. Derek was already inside, leaning back, legs crossed like he owned the place. "Look who finally escaped the asylum," he said, grin wide. I just shook my head and dropped into the chair across from him. "Don't get comfortable," I warned. He lifted his coffee in mock salute. Marcellus sat at the head of the table, flipping open a slim laptop. "First things first," he said, "this is yours now." He turned the screen toward me. "Director of Strategic Partnerships, Nexus Technologies." I stared at the words longer than I meant to. They felt real. Not a consolation prize, not a demotion hidden in jargon. A promise. But promises were easy to make in rooms like this. I cleared my throat. "What do you need from me today?" Marcellus's answer was immediate. Presence. Listen to everyone. Don't sell. Don't fix. Just hear them. It was disorienting. No client call calendars printed out and color-coded. No HR policy reviews waiting for my signature. Just people. We spent the morning in one-on-ones. I shook hands with analysts, sales leads, devs, and hoodies who wouldn't look me in the eye yet. Told them my name, my plan to keep things transparent, my number. Marcus showed up around 10 looking sheepish. "Couldn't let you start without me." I smiled so hard it hurt. We shook hands, the grip solid, an unsaid apology all at once. "Good to have you here," I said. By noon, Lena was on Slack saying her resignation email was typed up, and she just needed to hit send. I replied, "Don't do it for me. Do it for you." She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. But that was enough. After lunch, Marcellus led me to my new office. It wasn't big, but the walls were glass. No secrets. No place to hide. A stack of HR paperwork sat on the corner of the desk. I thumbed through it absently. Their policy packet was 10 pages, not 42. The compliance section was written in actual English. One line stuck with me. "We don't measure seat time. We measure impact." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since River Point. Miles's inhaler was in my coat pocket, a reminder of why I needed to make this work. Why failure wasn't an option. I spent the last hour setting up email, responding to Slack pings, reading over the client list. Many of the same names. Different expectations. I wasn't coming in to save them. I was coming in to lead them, which meant I couldn't just be the guy who burned it all down. I had to be the one who built it better. I leaned back in my chair as the sun dropped behind the Space Needle, thinking, tomorrow the real work begins. And that's when the first real problem landed in my inbox. Because freedom is messy, and some fires don't stay out just because you walk away. ChatGPT said I spent the first week at Nexus trying not to look over my shoulder. It's strange how silence can feel like safety and threat at the same time. At River Point, noise was constant Slack pings at midnight, endless urgent emails about trivial fires. Here, my inbox was manageable. Meetings started on time and ended early. But peace is deceptive when you're used to war. Marcellus kept his word. No daily check-ins, no micromanaging. He trusted me to build my team. I should have felt liberated. Instead, I found myself scanning the hallways waiting for the other shoe to drop. On Wednesday, it did. I was sipping bad conference room coffee, catching up on onboarding docs, when Derek poked his head in. "You see this?" He handed me his phone, an email forward. "River Point Legal." Subject contractual obligations and client non-solicitation. My chest tightened. They weren't dumb. They knew Nexus was picking off their clients one by one. I scrolled. Reminder that all employees remain bound by non-solicitation terms covering existing client relationships for a period of 12 months post-separation. My hands felt cold because I remembered that clause. But I also remembered the exception buried 3 lines down in 8-point font. Provided no active client contract is breached and client choice remains uncoerced. Legalese for, we can't stop them if they call you. I exhaled slow. They're phishing, I said. Derek nodded. Yeah, but they'll keep sending these. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. They want us scared, second-guessing every call, every email. He didn't respond. He didn't have to, because he knew I was right. Later that afternoon, I got a Slack from Marcus. Client on line 2, won't say name, said they only want Dalton. My heart sank and soared at the same time. I picked up voice steady. This is Eric. A familiar voice crackled over the speaker. Eric, Sasha Tran, Briarwood Systems. I swallowed. We hadn't spoken since I left. Hi, Sasha. She didn't waste time. Riverpoint reassigned us to a junior. We're 3 weeks behind on deliverables. I don't need excuses. I need to know if you're available. I hesitated. I'm not allowed to solicit you. I need you to say what you want. She snorted. I want you on this. Nexus Riverpoint don't care. I'm hiring you, not them. That got a small, tired laugh out of me. All right, I'll loop in our team. After we hung up, I just sat there, thinking about the absurdity of it. How they'd tried to break me with that 50% pay cut. How they thought they were buying silence. But you can't buy trust back once you've sold it off. I leaned over my desk looking at my new Nexus badge. It didn't have weight yet, but it was mine, and it felt better than that old Riverpoint one ever did. I opened the compliance handbook thin, clear, and plain English. Found the section on client acquisition ethics. Client choice is paramount. We do not initiate poaching. We enable transition. I underlined it with my pen, because that was my defense, my promise to myself. I wasn't going to be like them, but I was going to win. That night, Miles fell asleep on the couch, inhaler in hand. I carried him to bed, careful not to jostle him. Stood in his doorway for a long time. He was the reason I'd stayed at Riverpoint too long, and now he was the reason I wouldn't back down. The next morning, an email landed in my Nexus inbox. Eric, we've got another client asking to move. Riverpoint is pushing back hard. They're threatening to sue. I read it twice, and I realized leaving was only the beginning. The real fight was just getting started. I didn't even bother with coffee that morning. I knew what was waiting in my inbox before I opened it. Riverpoint, cease and desist. It was written in stiff lawyerly prose, so familiar it made me laugh out loud. We are formally requesting that you and your employer, Nexus Technologies, immediately cease any and all contact with former Riverpoint clients pursuant to the contractual non-solicitation provisions outlined in Section 12.4. Section 12.4. I could quote it from memory, because I'd spent nights during my last weeks there, studying every line, every comma, knowing this day would come. I scrolled to the bottom and found the phrase I was waiting for. This letter does not constitute formal legal action at this time. Of course it didn't, because they didn't have the standing. I pushed back from my desk, exhaling through my teeth. This wasn't a letter. It was a warning shot. Derek walked in as I was reading it again. He didn't say anything at first. Just watch me. Finally, they gonna do it. I shook my head. They're bluffing. Their own clause says client choice is exempt. Unless they can prove coercion, they've got nothing. He smirked. That'll make a fun deposition. I laughed once. Sharp, dry. I won't give them one. I hit reply. Wrote carefully. Riverpoint Legal. Per your letter, please note that no contact with former clients has been initiated by me or any employee of Nexus. Any ongoing communication is client-driven and fully documented. We remain committed to respecting all contractual obligations while honoring client autonomy. Eric Dalton. I read it twice. Polite, professional, immovable. When I hit send, my hand was steady, but my stomach turned, because I knew this wasn't over. I spent the rest of the day prepping the team. But Marcus, Lena, Jody all huddled in my glass office like conspirators. Here's how this works, I told them. No one reaches out first. Ever. If they call us, we log it. Save every email, every Slack message. We don't chase, we receive. They nodded, silent, grim. I knew what they were thinking. Same thing I was. This wasn't the freedom we thought we were buying. This was a different kind of cage. Lena raised her hand like we were back in a training seminar. What about pricing discounts to entice them? I shook my head. No games, no undercuts. We don't want the cheapest clients. We want the loyal ones. Jody cracked a knuckle against her palm. You think Riverpoint's gonna let them go quietly? I met her eyes. They don't have a choice. Clients aren't hostages. But that was the lie I told them, and myself, because I knew Riverpoint better than anyone. I knew the pressure calls that would start, the just checking in emails with legal CC'd, the back-channel vendor threats, the audits timed for maximum inconvenience. They'd burn goodwill like gasoline if it meant blocking me, and they'd do it with a smile, because they weren't just fighting to keep clients. They were fighting to punish me for leaving. I thought of Miles asleep back home, his inhaler on the nightstand, of all the times I'd stayed silent for security. I wasn't going to do that now. That night I sent one more email to Marcellus. Subject Riverpoint escalation. They've sent formal warnings. We're clear legally, but they'll keep pushing. My recommendation, get ahead of this. Let clients know we won't play dirty. Set the tone. Earn trust by refusing to hide. He replied in less than 5 minutes. Agreed. Let's talk in the morning. Proud of you. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted, wired, but certain of one thing. They were going to learn that kicking me out wasn't the end of the problem. It was the start. ChatGPT said I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Miles breathe. In the next room, the hush of his nebulizer, like the world's slowest metronome. It was supposed to be enough to get out. It was supposed to be enough to just build something better. But Riverpoint wasn't done with me. And the worst part, I wasn't sure I was done with them either. I got to Nexus before sunrise. The building was dark except for the motion sensor lights in the lobby. Security nodded at me. He was used to seeing me early now. I rode the elevator up alone, watching my own reflection tighten in the doors. By the time I reached my office, Marcellus was already there. He sat in my chair, feet planted, hands folded, the Nexus badge clipped to his pocket, waiting. I closed the door behind me without saying anything. He didn't move. Finally, he spoke. They're not going to stop. And I laughed once dry. No, they're not. He drummed his fingers on the armrest. You think they'll sue? I shrugged. They want to, but they know they can't win. They're trying to make it so miserable I cave. He didn't argue, because he knew I was right. I sat across from him. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then I said it, the thing I'd been chewing on for days. I think we should go public. He raised an eyebrow. Define public. Write it out. Transparent, no threats, just the truth. A letter to our clients' vendors. Hell, LinkedIn if we have to. We lay out the non-solicitation clause. We explain the exception. We say we're not poaching. They're choosing. He sat back, exhaling. You sure? I nodded slowly. People hate feeling manipulated, even corporations. Riverpoint is banking on silence, confusion, fear. We kill that. He chewed on that for a second. Then he nodded. That's a move. But I wasn't finished. I'm not naming names. I'm not going personal. No mudslinging. Just policy, ethics, why it matters. He smiled. That's you all over Dalton. I felt my jaw tighten. Not a compliment. He shook his head. No, it is. But understand transparency invites scrutiny. Once we do this, we have to be perfect. I let that hang between us. Because he was right. We'd have to live it. No shortcuts. No games. I turned my head to look out the window. Seattle waking up. Lights blinking on. I thought about Riverpoint. About Brent. About the board meetings where I'd sat silent while people got cut, pretending the axe would never swing my way. About Shannon from HR handing me that 50% pay cut like it was a gift. About every email I'd sent at 2 a.m. About every birthday party I'd missed. About Miles's quiet question in the dark. Do they really need you that much, Dad? I closed my eyes. They don't get to own the story. Marcellus broke the silence. You sure you're ready for them to see you? I looked at him. Really looked at him. I think I'm finally ready to see myself. He smiled. Small, tired, genuine. All right, draft it. When I got back to my desk, I pulled up a blank document. No heading. No corporate branding. Just my words. I want to be clear about something. I didn't leave Riverpoint to take anything from anyone. I left because they made it impossible to stay. I didn't recruit. I didn't poach. I just picked up the phone when people I cared about called. Because client choice isn't a slogan. It's the job. I stopped typing for a second, rubbed my eyes, reached for my wallet, thumbed the corner of a photo. Miles 5 years old, gap-toothed grinning at the zoo. I kept it there for mornings like this. Reminders of why. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. They're gonna hit back. They're going to smear you. They're going to make you regret this. I started typing anyway, because fear didn't get to have the last word anymore. And when I finished that draft, reading it aloud to the empty office, I knew exactly how I'd end it. You can threaten me, you can chase me, but you can't make me lie about what happened. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about beating them. It was about freeing myself. I leaned back in my chair, watching the cursor blink, knowing there was one last move to make. And I was ready to make it. I sat there with the final draft open on my screen, watching the cursor blink like it was daring me to back down. I didn't. I hit send. It went to every client who had ever trusted me enough to pick up the phone at 2 a.m. It went to every vendor who'd waited for a late payment because I asked them to. It went to every Nexus teammate who deserved to know exactly what we stood for. And then I posted it on my personal LinkedIn. No company logo, no PR spin, just me. I didn't leave to steal. I left because staying would have meant lying. I don't poach. I don't threaten. I just answer the phone when people who know me decide to call. I logged out and closed my laptop. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from relief. I picked up Miles from school that afternoon. He threw his backpack in the trunk and climbed in next to me. "You look tired," he said. I laughed. "Thanks for the honesty." He shrugged. "You're smiling, though." I paused. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I guess I am." That night, I sat on the porch, the Seattle drizzle misting my face, watching the streetlights blur like old memories. My phone buzzed nonstop. Some calls were thank yous. Some were job offers. Some were threats. But I didn't feel cornered anymore. Because the truth was out there now. No spin, no script, just the truth. And Riverpoint. They tried to counter. They posted a carefully worded announcement about respecting all contractual obligations. But people could smell the fear in it. Because once you explain the rules clearly, you make it impossible for them to hide behind them. Clients started calling me directly. No NDA in the world can kill loyalty if you've done the work. Vendors offered better terms just to be in the room with us. Even some of the folks who stayed at Riverpoint reached out quietly. Wish I could leave too. One email in particular stuck with me. It was from Priya, who'd trained her own replacement before they let her go. She wrote, "Thank you for making it okay to say what happened out loud. Nobody ever does." I sat with that line for a long time. Because that's all I'd really wanted, to say it out loud. You want to know the real secret. It was never about revenge. It was about reclamation, of time, of dignity, of the simple truth that you can be good at your job without being treated like you're disposable. Riverpoint didn't collapse overnight. They just kept losing the people who knew why the work mattered. Their best clients drifted away one quiet decision at a time. No scandal, no headlines, just an exodus of trust. At Nexus, we kept growing. We didn't hire people. We invited them. We didn't close contracts. We built relationships. We didn't just avoid becoming Riverpoint. We remembered why we existed in the first place. One night after an especially long day, Miles sat on the couch next to me. "Dad." "Yeah. Are you gonna get fired again?" I smiled. "Not this time, buddy." He looked at me hard like he was testing me. "Good. I like you better now. That's the part they never tell you about leaving. It doesn't end when you walk out the door. It ends when you decide who you're going to be without them. I don't regret leaving. I regret waiting so long to believe I could. And if you're reading this right now, wondering if you're next in line for that conference room ambush, or if you're already gone staring at a cardboard box in the trunk of your car, just know you're not worthless. You're undervalued, and that's fixable, because they can set the rules. They can control the room, but they will never own your value. That's yours. And sometimes the most powerful move you'll ever make is to stand up, look them in the eye, and walk out the door you built for yourself. I don't want to be the only one telling these stories. Share your experience below so others know they're not alone. And if you think we need more honest talk about how work really is, subscribe. I'll keep telling the truth here.